arrive. Merci de m'avoir reçu aujourd'hui. Les voy a hablar sobre il potere del dialogo وأريد أن أركز على 3 نقاط. Hello, I'm Victoria Ball, a security analyst, company founder and director, and ardent communicator. I'd like to talk today about the power of talking. I'm going to look at how embracing our innate curiosity is the natural path to talking to others, and that when we talk, we start to understand. Now that's important because for me, understanding is the key to equality. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, my parents and I went on holiday to Spain. There was a wedding going on, and my parents soon got chatting to the grown-ups, and I went off to play with the children. We spent the whole evening together. And eventually, when my parents came to scoop me up and carry me to bed, they asked what I'd been doing. I explained that we'd been chatting about party dresses and playing make-believe, doctors, princesses, dragons. My mother looked confused and asked how I knew what they'd been saying, as I didn't speak a word of Spanish at the time. "What's Spanish?" I asked. As a curious child, I had been so keen to talk to my new friends. It hadn't even dawned on me that we were speaking different languages. We had chatted. We had made ourselves understood. Children are hardwired to be curious. I was always asking, why? Developmental psychologist Jean Piaget explained this as the driver to construct knowledge. As children, we haven't yet learned what we're meant to say or who we're meant to talk to. So we have no fear, just to ask questions and talk to people. As adults, we should tap into that curiosity, open our eyes to the world, and just start talking. This is me trying to make sense of a French storybook, having just discarded the miniature German dictionary on the floor there. I try to maintain that childlike curiosity as an adult, and a big part of it is that I've always loved learning languages. Well, actually, I love speaking languages. There's a Czech proverb which says, "You live a new life for every language you speak." Or, as the American journalist Flora Lewis put it, learning another language is learning another way to think about things. Sadly, by the time children become young adults, they become susceptible to seeing the world in black and white. Now, maybe that's a way of dealing with the massive information overload we have to process as we get older. You only have to look at social media to see how we write statements rather than engage in actual conversations. Because talking always involves at least 2 people. It's a human interaction. We can see the effects of our words on others. We can read their emotional responses. Talking is the very building block of all human relationships. Professional, social, political. And it is these relationships that make the world go round. Even when we comment on posts, algorithms ensure that we exist online in echo chambers, surrounded by others who share the same worldview as us. Now, this can aggravate and perpetuate sectarianism, intolerance, and division. I founded my company, Eloquentia Communication, to help young people realize just how amazing the world is when we embrace its multicolored complexity. We run group workshops and one-to-one mentorship to help young people develop critical and lateral thinking skills. I asked one young boy to think of someone, a political figure, he hated. It could be anyone, from history or the present day, that he found truly abhorrent. I then asked him to think of all the reasons someone might support that person and to persuade me to vote for them. I love watching that transformative moment when someone starts to see an issue from another perspective and starts to understand why this person might have a different opinion from their own. Because when we talk, we start to understand. My grandfather fought against the Japanese in the Second World War. Now, the war in Asia was, by all accounts, a brutal conflict that really took its toll on all those involved. My grandparents lost many friends and knew many sent to prisoner of war camps. But several years later, in the 1960s, my grandfather took his young family, including my mother, to Tokyo. He told my mother he wanted to make her realize that they were just like the Japanese, ordinary people who had been made to fight for their country, just as my grandfather had fought for his. He wanted to talk to the Japanese so that he understood them. Now, perhaps my grandfather was so understanding because he was from the deeply divided society of Northern Ireland. As a security analyst and researcher into conflict and terrorism, I now do a lot of work there. In fact, I was recently in Northern Ireland interviewing former political prisoners. I spoke to people from both loyalist and Republican backgrounds, and what struck me was that tensions were highest, that the hatred strongest, in the areas where the two communities had no contact. I interviewed a Catholic who showed me his church, his pub, his housing estate, his leisure centre, and explained that no Protestant ever ventured there. I then spoke to a Protestant who told me the inverse was true for his community. Loyalist areas were covered in anti-Republican murals, and Republican areas were covered in anti-loyalist murals. The two communities lived parallel lives, divided by walls, never mixing, let alone talking to each other. Unsurprisingly, each saw the other as the enemy, the antithesis of everything they stood for. I interviewed two priests, one Catholic, one Protestant, who said if only people talked, they'd understand how much they had in common. Because when we talk, we start to understand. When we understand, we start to respect. And when we respect, it seems logical, natural even, to treat each other as equals. So if there's one thing I'd like you to take away today, it's that there is more that unites us than divides us. If we embrace our childlike curiosity and just talk to each other, we will start to make sense of the way others see the world, and will come to understand just how similar we all are. Thank you.